Gentlemen, good morning, and thank you for joining us on this webinar where we will be discussing the opportunities for Chinese issuers in Dubai. My name is Tahir Mahmood and I head business development at both Nasdaq Dubai and Dubai Financial Market. I would first like to thank Mr. Wang Weihai, President of the Chinese Business Council in UAE, for arranging this webinar and giving us the opportunity to talk about Dubai's capital market. Also joining us is Mr. Hitesh Asarpota, Head of Loan Syndications and Capital Markets at Emirates NBD Capital, one of the leading investment banks here in the region. Hitesh and his team are very active on both equity and fixed income transactions and have worked on some of the leading transactions in both the region and internationally, including a number of transactions from Chinese issuers. We will provide you with an overview of the work that they have done and talk to you about investors in the region. United Arab Emirates is the second largest Arab economy, and China has been one of the top trading partners with the UAE for a number of years. The two countries enjoy a good strategic relationship at the government and business levels. Dubai itself is host to as many as 138 of the global Fortune 500 companies, Middle East and Africa headquarters, well ahead of any other center. Now, Dubai is further strengthening its position as the region's business and capital markets hub. This includes Dubai's role in the Belt and Road Initiative, which is so beneficial to countries within and around the region and China in itself. Nasdaq Dubai's activities in supporting Chinese companies are unmatched anywhere in our region, and the potential for this relationship to continue growing is unlimited. But before I provide you with an overview of Nasdaq Dubai and DFM, I would like to request Mr. Wang to honor us with a welcome address. Mr. Wang, over to you, please.
Okay, thank you. So ladies and gentlemen, and friends from business community, good morning. It's my great honor to attend this webinar jointly organized by China Business Council and Nasdaq Dubai, and meet you all here. So on behalf of China Business Council, I'd like to express my sincere gratitude to Nasdaq Dubai for the elaborated planning of this event and participation from all members. Formed in June 2004, China Business Council is a non-profit social organization comprising of Chinese companies and groups doing the business in UAE. The council is devoted to promoting multilateral communication and cooperation among Chinese companies in this region, enhancing engagement with local government and the business community, and expanding economic and trade cooperation with UAE. After more than 10 years' effort, the council has attracted almost all large and medium-sized Chinese state-owned enterprise, and most Chinese private companies have a long history of operation in UAE and with high reputations. Our membership business covers multiple areas in energy, infrastructure, finance, communication, shipping, aviation, logistics, and tourism. The total number of members now exceeds 180. Facing the impact and the challenges brought by COVID-19 pandemic, members of the council would well take this opportunity of this joint meeting with Nasdaq Dubai to help better understand the policy and the advantage of Dubai's capital market, explore more options and support for companies to list and operate, attract investment and raise funds for projects among the Belt and the Road. As a platform for Chinese enterprise in UAE, China Business Council will continue to liaise with the government, business association, financial institution, and host various online activities by building a digital platform in order to support Chinese companies in their development in this region. Broaden the channel for China and UAE cooperation, provide quality service, create confidence, promote economic and trade ties, and make our contribution to realizing the mutual benefit and resource share. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wang, for your welcome address. I will now share my screen to go through the presentation on Dubai's capital market. If you have any questions, please do share them with us through the Q&A facility at the bottom of the screen, and we'll try to answer as many of them towards the end of the webinar. I hope everyone can see my presentation. So to give you a quick overview around how the capital markets are set up here in Dubai, we have two exchanges. You have Nasdaq Dubai and Dubai Financial Market. Essentially, the DFM is the onshore exchange, and Nasdaq Dubai is the exchange that is set up here in the Dubai International Financial Center, the free zone. The key difference between the two exchanges are two different regulators. DFM is regulated by the Securities and Commodities Authority, which is a homegrown regulations they've created to cater for companies initially within UAE and the wider region. And the Dubai Financial Services Authority has essentially set up their regulations based on international standards similar to what you have in EU, in Europe. What we have common on the two exchanges is the investor base. So brokers locally and internationally are connected to both exchanges, and an investor can use one brokerage account to trade on both DFM and Nasdaq Dubai. So the liquidity pool, which comes from over 100 countries, is the same for both of the exchanges. If we look at key figures of the exchanges, the capital markets here, the total market capitalization across all asset class stands at $228 billion. We have admitted over $166 billion worth of capital since the beginning of 2014. Today, we have 74 equity listings on DFM and Nasdaq Dubai, and we're the leading debt listing jurisdiction in the region with 125 listings with a total value of $97 billion. And with the first regional market to offer equity futures on GCC stocks, currently offering 29 different equity futures covering UAE and Saudi markets. The market's been growing and we've been very dynamic. Over the last year compared to 2019, we saw an increase of over 22% in trading value. The average daily trading last year stood at over $77 million on the exchanges. And we've been seeing a lot of more increased interest from foreign investors. Our foreign ownership currency stands around 18% of the market cap. Trading by foreign investors has been increasing over the years, and today nearly half of the trading is by foreign investors, and institutional investors play a key role on the market as well, with 45% of trading by institutional investors. Now, when it comes to investors, one of the key things we want to highlight here is by listing on DFM or Nasdaq Dubai here in Dubai, you're not targeting only regional investors. You're actually getting access to investors all around the world. The map you can see in front of you gives you a snapshot of where investors were coming from for a particular equity listing on the exchanges. 37% of those investors were from the Americas, 30% were from Europe, 27% from Middle East and Africa, and 6% from Asia Pacific. So when a company comes and lists on DFM and Nasdaq Dubai, not only are you accessing the local and regional investors, you're also accessing investors from all around the world, which is a key benefit that we offer to companies that list with us. When it comes to who is listed on the equities perspective, DFM itself is the first exchange in the region to be to go public, and they're listed on DFM. And we also have leading names here in UAE, such as Emirates NBD, Malls, and we also have international companies that are listed on the exchanges as well. So a mix of both local and international companies are listed with us. From a debt perspective, we have some of the leading issuers in UAE, in the region, and outside of the region as well. And importantly, issuers from China have used Nasdaq Dubai to list its fixed income securities. I'll talk a little bit more about Chinese issuers later on in this presentation. And one of there's two key things I always say when it comes to choosing your venue. One is investor access, which we've already spoken about. The other one is visibility. Using listing on an exchange is using the visibility the exchange gives is just as important as the access to investors it gives as well. And that's one thing which we as a Nasdaq branded exchange really capitalize on, where we provide visibility here in the UAE and the region, but as well as all the way to Nasdaq in New York through announcements on the Nasdaq Tower in Times Square. So where we work with issuers is creating that visibility and the brand awareness, and where our partners such as Emirates NBD Capital work is giving access to the right investors that an issuer is looking for. I want to start with talking a little bit about the fixed income and when it comes to our market and the process to list. Today we are one of the leading venues when it comes to both conventional bonds and sukuk. Sukuk being Islamic bonds for those of our listeners who are not aware of sukuk. We have 85 sukuk listed here in Dubai with a total value of 73.5 billion. Additionally, when it comes to conventional bonds, we have 38 conventional bonds with a total value of 23.9 billion. And over the last 3 years, we've attracted over $40 billion worth of fixed income listing on the exchanges. When it comes to the mix of issuers that are listing with us, is just over 50% are UAE issuers and close to 50% are non-UAE issuers. So we're not a market that predominantly caters for local issuers. We actually cater for both local and international issuers. And you'll see when it comes to UAE issuers, we have some of the key names here in UAE that list with us. And when it comes to international issuers, we've got various governments such as Hong Kong, Indonesia, Maldives that have listed, as well as local, regional and international institutions that have chosen Nasdaq Dubai as a listing venue. Moving on to the requirements and the process. Requirements are quite straightforward. We only require market capitalization of $2 million. So even some of the smaller companies that are issuing smaller fixed income securities can list with us. We require 2 years of audited financials, and the prospectus needs to be in accordance with the DFCA's requirements. As I mentioned earlier, the DFCA's regulations are very similar to international standards. So if you're a regular issuer of fixed income and you've listed your securities on markets such as Hong Kong, Singapore, or the London Stock Exchange, you'll essentially require very similar prospectus to these markets to list on Nasdaq Dubai as well. So we're not creating something new here. There aren't additional requirements that you'll need to follow. It's very much in accordance to the international standards. From a process perspective, of course, the first key task that you'll need to do is appointment of your advisors. The advisor will then work with you on putting the documentation together, which will include the prospectus as well as the investor presentation. Various due diligence will be done both from a legal and financial perspective. You'll then put the application into the regulator for approval of the prospectus and an application into Nasdaq Dubai for the admission to trading. Your advisors will then take you on the roadshow and meet with various investors to do the capital raising. And once you've completed the roadshow, the listing will go ahead and will work with you on the bell ringing and the various visibility and PR activities. So it's a very straightforward process that we follow, which, as I mentioned, is in line with the international best practices. When it comes to China, China has been a very important focus for us, and to be able to attract Chinese issuers, for them to reach out to investors here in the UAE and the wider region. And we've had issuers, we've had 5 issuers from China who have listed their bonds with us. ICBC has been one of the largest issuers that have been listing with us for quite a number of years, as well as China Construction Bank, one of the first issuers from China that listed its bonds with us. They have 6 issuance with us now. We've also had Yinchuan Tongliang Capital Investment Operation Company list their bond with us back in 2017. And additionally, we've had the Bank of China and the Agricultural Bank of China choose Nasdaq Dubai as a listing venue as well. If I quickly move on to the equity capital markets, again, fixed income is where we started when it comes to Chinese issuers using Nasdaq Dubai as a platform to access investors in the region. Equity capital markets is something that we've been working on over the past couple of years very closely with potential issuers, and we have some Chinese issuers that are looking at listing their company on Nasdaq Dubai today. Now, to give you a bit of an overview around the different opportunities that we offer on the equity side, both on DFM and Nasdaq Dubai, we cater for a broad range of companies. So you don't have to be one of the large organizations to come and join the exchange's main markets. We start with private companies that are preparing themselves for an IPO and want to start creating brand awareness within the region. We have the private market on DFM and Nasdaq Dubai that you can join. Essentially, it's a way for us to build that relationship and connect you with key market participants here in the region. We then, for those companies that have set up an onshore entity here in Dubai, we provide the second market on DFM, which allows those companies to be able to list, to allow their shareholders a route to exit without the requirement of raising capital. More recently, last year, we made the announcement of Nasdaq Dubai's growth market, a market which is targeted towards your SMEs, those companies that are valued below $250 million. And in this segment, what we realize is when it comes to doing an IPO for some of the smaller companies, we need to ensure that it's cost efficient. And I'll talk a little bit about the changes we made in the growth market. And then, of course, with the main market, in parallel to the main market, you have the opportunity to dual list. So any company that's currently listed on an exchange elsewhere around the world can choose to dual list, and should they wish, raise capital from the regional market as well by listing on either DFM or Nasdaq Dubai. So that's just a broad overview of the different equity markets that we offer on the two exchanges. If we start with a more detailed look at the DFM's main market, it's catered towards onshore companies, so companies which are established here on the onshore market in UAE, and they have, to list on DFM main market, you'll require 2 years financial track record with profitability. It requires a minimum paid up capital of $30 million, and the minimum free float on the market is 30%. There are no restrictions on foreign ownership limits. It depends on the articles of association of the company itself. But as I mentioned, the legal structure for the main market needs to be firstly an onshore public joint stock company. Now, in addition to those companies that are onshore, you have free zones here in the UAE as well. And a lot of international companies choose to set up their company within free zones in Dubai and in UAE. And both DFM and Nasdaq Dubai's main markets cater for these companies to list on the exchanges, as well as international companies have the ability to list directly with us as well. And very similar listing requirements with slight changes. The market capitalization for DFM main market through free zone access is 20 million dirham as opposed to 30 million for onshore companies. And for the main market on Nasdaq Dubai, is a minimum market capitalization of $250 million to list with us. Paid up capital for DFM is 20 million dirham, with again a profitability of 2 years to list on DFM. One of the key differences with Nasdaq Dubai is we do not have a profitability requirement. So a company doesn't need to show any history of profitability in order to list with us. But one key aspect here is the interest from investors. Although we don't require the company to be profitable, you'll need to speak to your advisors to see, depending on the operations of the company and the business plan, what the interest of investors would be. Again, financials are very similar. DFM requires 2 years, Nasdaq by 3, it requires 3 years. But on the free float perspective, we require 25% free float to be listed with us. When it comes to dual listings for companies that are already listed elsewhere and wish to list do a secondary listing here, it's a 25% free float on both markets. So it doesn't mean you have to do an additional 25% offering here in Dubai. We allow 100% foreign ownership, so you don't have any restrictions. And as I mentioned, this is for both free zone companies as well as international companies that can list directly with us. From a valuations perspective, we follow the book building process. So it's not the regulators that will dictate the valuation. It's allowing investors to essentially invest at a valuation that they're comfortable with. And when it comes to listing advisors, we have investment banks that can act as a listing advisor, or on the growth market, which we'll speak about. We have the boutique corporate advisory firms as well. Now, when it comes to the growth market, at the end of October last year, His Highness, the Crown Prince of Dubai, His Highness Sheikh Hamdan bin Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, announced the initiative of our growth market. And the reason we wanted to offer a market in particular for SMEs is because we were finding that our main markets were essentially catering to those well-established organizations, those with strong financial performance, potentially companies that are large in size and operating in multiple markets. And it was missing out on those sort of younger, smaller companies that were looking for early stage and growth stage capital. And what we wanted to do, we wanted to provide an alternative to these companies to be able to raise money instead of going to your venture capital firms or private equity firms. We wanted to provide a public route for them. And that's where we created the growth market as an alternative to raising capital from a private perspective. The key differences when it comes to growth market compared to the main markets on DFM and Nasdaq Dubai is you have to be a company where at the time of listing your market capitalization is below $250 million. Instead of a 2 or 3 year financial track record, we only require 1 year financial track record. So for some of the younger companies, they're able to go into and list on a public market quite quickly without having to wait until the company's well established. The free float remains at 25%. We have introduced a 1 year mandatory lock-in period for existing shareholders. And the listing advisor, instead of having a sponsor, we've replaced it with a listing advisor, or as the regulator refers to, a compliance advisor. And a compliance advisor, where with a sponsor, it needs to be a investment bank. With a compliance advisor, it can be one of the local corporate advisory firms as well. And the other key change that we made is on an ongoing perspective, on the growth market, the listing advisor needs to be appointed for a minimum of 3 years post-listing. So these are the key changes that we've made when it comes to the growth market to allow SMEs to be able to access. Now, I'm not going to go through the listing process in a lot of detail, but essentially it's very similar to what you'll find in international markets. I've split this into essentially four sections. You've got the preparation, where you'll start putting your plan together, you'll start appointed advisors, working with your advisors, and ensuring that you have everything in place in order to progress for the IPO itself. You then have your legal and regulatory process, where you look at any legal structure changes that need to be done. You'll have your advisors putting the prospectus together, putting the various applications together and submitting them to the regulator and to the exchange. You'll have your investor engagement process, where your sponsor and advisor will start looking at early look roadshows. They'll start liaising with investors, with analysts, with various brokers, and start building up the interest before you go out and do the roadshow. And then you have the final stage where you'll actually go to market. So once you've received the approval on the prospectus, your advisors will take you on the roadshow. You'll raise the capital, and then you'll do the listing on the exchanges. And as I mentioned, part of the whole listing is where we'll work with you when it comes to a PR and visibility perspective. So that's a quick brief overview around our markets. What I will do, I will share these contact details with you at the end of the presentation, should you want to reach out directly to ourselves or Emirates NBD. But what I'll do now is I am going to pass you over to Hitesh, who will give you an overview of Emirates NBD Capital and talk to you about investors here in the region. Over to you, Hitesh. I'll just start the presentation for you.
Thank you, Tariq.
Can you see the presentation there, Hitesh?
Yes, I can, Tariq. Okay, good morning to everyone. My name is Hitesh. I look after capital markets and loan syndications for Emirates NBD Capital. And what I'll do is go through a very quick overview of Emirates NBD Group and our credentials in this space. And we can then move on to perhaps a quick Q&A on access to investors in this part of the world. So Emirates NBD is one of the largest banking groups in the Middle East and North Africa. It has assets of over $190 billion. We are present in 13 countries. In addition to the UAE, the key markets that we cover in the region are Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Bahrain. The bank is rated A+ by Fitch, A3 by Moody's. And you know, in the UAE, we have about a 20% market share for both corporate and retail assets. Doug, we'll skip through the next page. This just gives an overview of what we do at ENBD Capital, equity capital markets and advisory, loan syndications, and DCM. On the DCM, we're one of the most active banks from the region. We have a full-fledged capital markets team that covers both the origination and the distribution. And in addition to that, we have a credit research team that assists investors both from this part of the world and outside in keeping pace with the credit markets in this part of the world. On the equity side, we have, again, one of the more active teams in the region. We are licensed by both the onshore regulator, which is ESCA, as well as the FSA. We've done several IPOs in this part of the world. One of the key strengths that we have on that space is obviously a deep understanding of the region's capital markets and very, very deep access to investors. The investors are both institutional all the way up to private banking and retail banking clients. This is a quick snapshot of what we've done in China and South Asia. Again, as I mentioned, we are the most active bank from this part of the world. We've recently concluded a green bond for Industrial Bank of China. And in the recent past, we've done issuances for Bank of China, which was also in green format, Minsheng Financial Leasing, Far East Horizon, China CITIC Bank, and several issuances for ICBC Bank, both from the Dubai and the Singapore branch. We also, led issuances for commodity players like Puma and Mercuria, as well as a lot of issuers from Indonesia. In addition to what we've done in China, it's been, last few years have been very, very active. Some of the other kind of key transactions that we have led as a leading book runner has been for sovereigns like the government of Maldives. We recently issued a $200 million Islamic bond for them and added a tab to that. We've done a sovereign issuance for the government of UK. We've done sovereign issuance for the government of Pakistan. We've led issuances in the past for the Republic of Turkey. I've led issuances for the government of Malaysia. We've done issuances for the Republic of Indonesia and so on. In addition to that, we cover quite a few other issuers, both development banks like the Eurasian Development Bank, issuers from Russia, from Turkey, from Africa, as well as from the GCC. So as I mentioned, one of our key kind of strengths is our ability to distribute both bonds and equity into investors. For the fixed income side, what's important to note is that the number of investors are relatively few, but the average ticket size for each investor tends to be a bit higher. As you can see on this page, we have a very good mix between bank treasuries, asset managers, insurance companies, and private banks in this part of the world. And we've been frequently distributing to them China-based fixed income paper over the last 2 to 3 years. And when we talk about equity offerings, these are the 4 key investor types that we cover in the region. One is the sovereign wealth funds. As you know, this region has quite a few of them, quite a few of very large ones. So we cover, sovereign wealth funds like GIC, KIA, QIA, ADIA, and ICD. There are also the asset managers here, who are the most sophisticated investors, typically that we invite to early look meetings. And in addition to that, we cover the family offices and the regional institutions. The family offices is interesting because they have quite a bit of liquidity that they deploy into offerings that we bring to them. And they're also very unique in terms of most of these are very close relationships with Emirates NBD. So entities or investors that can, not be easily tapped by other institutions. Here is a quick list of some of the regional accounts. These are tier 1 accounts in the region, and as you can see from a family office perspective, you have quite a few names over here that we bank with at various levels. So we cover in the region Dubai, Abu Dhabi, KSA, the rest of the GCC, as well as the accounts that are based in the DIFC. Mostly asset managers and international institutions. Update on the league tables for dollar sukuk transactions in 2020. We were ranked 3rd globally, and in terms of CEMEA issuances, we were ranked 7th in all of CEMEA. I would point out we were ranked higher than some banks that you would expect to have a wider reach, like SocGen, BofA, as well as Goldman Sachs. A quick update in terms of the transactions that we lead from the region. We tend to be a large investor ourselves as Emirates NBD. And we've noted the ranking we have on most of the recent issuances we've led. As you would see, we are typically the top 3 investor as ENBD group in most of the issuances that we bring to the market. Some of other tombstones in this space, a couple of these were again ESG issuances. Etihad Airways, for example, was the first transition sukuk, globally by an airline. I think another key point to note is that we cover issuers that are rated AAA all the way to single B and unrated, as well as, from a capital structure, we cover issuers all the way from senior unsecured to deeply subordinated tier 1 paper. We can skip to the end time. So I think a couple of other aspects to note. Obviously, Chinese issuers continue to be the largest issuers of fixed income US dollar bonds in the emerging market space. I think in the last 2 years, they've issued about $700 billion worth of capital. across 1,500 trades. In terms of our track record with bringing some of these issuers here, as you've seen, we've got a lot of repeat mandates from issuers, as we've been extremely successful in providing to them a couple of aspects that are key. One is we've leveraged the relationship to be able to obviously provide them a new diverse pool of liquidity. We've also, helped for some of these issuers who want to either, be more active in the region or look at other forms of capital raising, build profile, and more importantly, I think we've helped them achieve targets in terms of size and pricing and tenor and so on. Regional investors, including banks, tend to continue to be extremely liquid in this part of the world, and they're open to opportunities both on the debt and equity side, and we're very keen to be able to bring more and more issuers from your part of the world to list here and also to access investors in this part of the world. I'll pause there, and perhaps we can take questions or hand it back to you, Tara.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Hitesh. We have received some questions prior to the webinar, which we will address along with any questions that we may receive during this session. Please do share any questions you might have in the Q&A box. So the first question that came in asked, what are the conditions and requirements for listing on Nasdaq Dubai, and what are its advantages compared with exchanges such as Hong Kong, Singapore, London, and New York? Now, I've already covered the sort of listing requirements and the process to list on Nasdaq Dubai and DFM. So I'll talk a little bit about the advantages compared to other international exchanges. Now, one of the things I mentioned was from a regulatory perspective, our regulations are very similar to Europe, to Hong Kong, Singapore. US is slightly different because SEC as a regulator has different requirements compared to other regulators. But on a regulatory perspective, it's very similar. So you're getting that, top tier regulatory environment by coming to list in Dubai. What benefit do we offer compared to the other exchanges? Essentially, additional access to investors within the region. And when I say additional access, as you may recall from the slide that was showing you the map of where investors have been coming from on a particular equity listing, we have access to investors from all around the world. So if you have particular investors sitting in US you want to target, or Europe, or even Hong Kong, Singapore, they are able to trade on our markets. But additionally, what you'll have is the access to certain investors, which Hitesh had mentioned in some of his slides, that are based here in the region that like to trade within regional markets itself. So you will get access to both regional and international investors. Now, there was another question regarding, again, the listing conditions, requirements, the cycle, but which we've covered. But this particular person was asking about the financing costs of Chinese-owned localized companies. And I wanted to sort of pass this question on to Hitesh, who's in a better position to answer this. So Hitesh, maybe if you can talk about the financing costs for Chinese issuers that are potentially looking to raise capital here within the region.
Sure. So I think in terms of financing costs, they remain extremely competitive, both in the loan markets as well as in the capital markets. We continue to have issuers tap liquidity from this part of the world. And most of these are very well-established names, as you saw when I went through the presentation, top tier corporates, large leasing companies, and some of the largest banks in China. Their cost of financing is very competitive. They have an established yield curve. So for them to access investors from this part of the world means that the financing cost has to be in line or better than what they kind of can receive in other markets. So I think, although the specific cost depends, as you know, on the rating, the type of issuer, and the financials and the usual aspects, I think what's fair to say that the financing cost is competitive enough for the tier one names from China to access investors on this part of the world.
So, thank you, Tesh. We have another attendee asking about the requirements for information disclosure after listing, and if I may touch up on the equity side of listings, the ongoing disclosures we have are similar to other international markets, which include disclosures of things such as financials, changing board of directors and senior management, changing shareholding of connected persons, which would include any director or senior management member and any shareholder holding more than 5% of shares. And essentially any significant business transaction or event that may have an effect on the share price. So obviously, being a disclosure-based market, it's very important for issuers to keep their shareholders and the market informed of any key changes that would happen within the company post the listing. From a fixed income perspective, essentially is your regular semi and annual and end of year financials that need to be disclosed, and again, any change in board of directors or senior or significant activity within the organization. So it's something which for regular fixed income issuers is the same as what you'll be used to in any other markets. Again, we have a question here that is asking about requirements for listing sponsors and custodian banks. I'll start by just adding here that for the main market listing, as I mentioned, we require an investment bank to act as a sponsor. And for the growth market, it can be either an investment bank or a local corporate finance firm here in UAE that will act as a compliance advisor. We get asked a lot of the time questions around, can the sponsor be an international investment bank? There aren't any limitations for the sponsor to be here in UAE, but what we always suggest that it always benefits for you to work with a local investment bank such as Emirates NBD, because they have that connect with the regulators, with the investors within the region, as well as with investors internationally outside of the region as well. And we also see that it's always beneficial where you want to appoint an international bank for them to partner with one of the local investment banks. When it comes to custodian banks, there are a number of custodian banks we have connected to our market. We'll be happy to share the list of our network with anyone that would like to know. Please do get in touch with us. And Hitesh, if I may pass this over to you, because Emirates NBD Capital have acted as a sponsor on a number of listings here in Dubai. Maybe you can add something on the role of the sponsor that and the key things that as a sponsor you would do if acting on a IPO.
Sure. So I think the requirement for a sponsor essentially, as was pointed out, was to ensure that there is compliance with all the regulations that are set forward, to ensure that the entity advising you is aware of the regulatory framework, has the right credentials and the experience in the market that you're looking to access, right? So from that perspective, I think there is obviously always been a strong kind of case for an entity with local know-how, expertise, people on the ground to assist with issuers from a different part of the world to access markets.
Good. Thank you. And Hitesh, I'm going to pass the next question on to you as well, where the attendee is asking what financing products are available for local enterprises with capital needs to promote the implementation of project investment.
So if I get that question right, are you looking, I can tell you what financing options are available to issuers. We've obviously brought quite a few borrowers, from non-GCC countries to this part of the world to look at very specific targeted financing in the loan syndication space. We've done club deals as well as syndications. For some of them, we've done an Islamic tranche as well. So that's quite interesting because it brings you obviously a whole new set of lenders or investors. We've done private placements. for entities that are not looking for a very large benchmark issuance. We've obviously done the public transactions as well. So there's a whole suite of, products available to issuers. And if there are any other specific queries, then we are happy to discuss on a one-to-one basis as well.
Good, excellent. Thank you, Tesh. And then the next question, it talks about something which is very important, the One Belt, One Road initiative. And the attendee is asking whether there is any special policy related to the One Belt, One Road initiative. For Nasdaq Dubai, we see a very crucial role we can play as an exchange in the Belt and Road initiative in relation to our location and the connections we have to investors globally. We've been having a number of discussions with various authorities in China recently to see how we can support the initiative and help Chinese companies expand in the region and globally. China is a very important partner for us, and we are working to support a number of companies to grow in the region through the capital markets. We're also a member of the Belt and Road Bankers Roundtable Mechanism, BRBR, led by the Industrial and Commercial Bank of China, becoming the first foreign non-bank financial institution to join the BRBR mechanism and the first foreign stock exchange. This is an important initiative to be a part of, where we can support the growth of Chinese companies that are a member of the initiative. So as Nasdaq Dubai and DFM, we are really trying to see how we can support, not just through listings, but support the growth of Chinese companies here in the region, but also in the neighboring regions such as Africa, Europe, and the CIS region as well. Tesh, I know you guys are very active when it comes to China and the initiative. Would you like to add on the role or the key things that you're looking at when it comes to the Belt and Road initiative?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so again, we've been, the two governments are obviously very close, and the G2G connectivity is very, very strong, continues to get stronger. I think from that perspective, obviously, the UAE has been very supportive of the initiative as well. And with specifically for ENBD, we've been involved in One Belt, One Road, specific financing that was done in the capital market space, where we were one of the few banks globally chosen to help on that initiative as well.
Good. And Mr. Wang, I know, one of the key things for Chinese Business Council is to support the Chinese businesses that are looking to set up here already here in UAE. Maybe if you can just add a little bit around the Belt and Road initiative and what you've seen from your perspective when it comes to Dubai and UAE playing a key role for the Belt and Road initiative. Sorry, Mr. Wang, yeah.
Okay, so can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Yeah, so for us, so I would say that the relationship between the two countries is much closer than before. So we have involved in the most of the area for UAE's construction or development. So with Chinese companies. So I would like, at the moment, the capital is all the important is one of the important things for maybe hold the enterprise or private company to develop more, to expand their development area. So also I would like to to let you Dubai Capital and the investor constitute. So to look for so how to give some special policy to the company, how to get the capital support through some easy way or some so not so many program. So many things to be finished before to get that. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is my thought on that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, look, well, one of the key things the role we play as capital markets is to ensure that we ease the obstacles for companies, whether they're local or international companies that have presence here, to access capital and to grow. Growth is very important for us, and that's where we want to support companies both from growth using capital and attracting capital, but also from a business perspective, which is where, for us, working with the likes of Emirates NBD Capital, working with the likes of China Business Council and various other government organizations, associations to attract businesses, Chinese businesses to UAE in order for them to expand into regions such as Africa. The access to Africa from Dubai is very easy, and then we're seeing a lot of Chinese companies are coming to Dubai in order for them to get that ease of access into Africa. So we're ensuring that we're trying to make all different levels, whether from the capital markets or from the government perspective, trying to ease the access for businesses to the region and further afield under the Belt and Road Initiative. I'm going to move across to a question that's come in on the webinar, where they're asking, Dennis is asking, can I get a lawyer to be recommended by your side that can assist in the legal side? So when it comes to lawyers, and Dennis, we will definitely send you information about lawyers. Yes, you have the banks, and as we mentioned, both Hitesh and I, having a bank on the ground is very, very helpful. But also having a lawyer on the ground here is extremely helpful as well. And that's where in the DIFC we have some of the leading international law firms present here who will more than likely have offices in Hong Kong, in Singapore, or in mainland China as well, who can liaise between the two different offices. So we're always very helpful when it comes to connecting potential issuers to the right market participants. And we've also had a couple of people ask us around sharing the PowerPoint. We'll be happy to share, Nasdaq Dubai's PowerPoint. Please do, at the end of this session, I'll display the contact details for ourselves and for Emirates NBD. Please do email us with any further questions you might have, or with the request of more information, and we'll share that information with you. Okay. So that's all the questions that have been covered, and we are a bit short of time. So I'd like to firstly, once again, thank Mr. Wang and his team for organizing this webinar. Thank you to Hitesh for participating with us today as well. And thank you to our audience for joining us. We welcome Chinese companies that seek expanding their investor base and accessing new investors in our region. And for those that are looking for new listing venues overseas that will offer a warm welcome to their securities and provide access to capital from around the world. You'll be able to, as I mentioned, you'll be able to see our contact details. Please do reach out to us to learn more. We'll be happy to help you and assist you in your expansion plans here in the region. Thank you once again, and have an enjoyable rest of the day.